hello everybody. Welcome to It's the Goose live chat with today's special guest, Victoria Calamito, or Tori as she prefers to be called. Hello, Tori. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. How are you?
If things were going any better, I'd be embarrassed.
I
You like that show busy answer? Um,
love that show business answer. And I'm honestly so excited to talk about this show because it is such a forgotten gem.
yeah. So when and we have Marcus Blackwell, a regular here. Hello, everyone. I
Hi,
thought this would be
Marcus.
later tonight. Nope. Put the AM. Made sure to put the AM in the Eastern time. That's what I think confused a few people here because we got folks from all over the world and it's all over confusing. But hey, if you can't watch it now, you can watch it later. Yeah. So we were just talking about the cartoon, and before we get into that, I want to just kind of ask you because I purposely didn't want to have much contact with you before because I wanted to be surprised because obviously Wizard of Oz is, I mean, it's one of the like oldest like franchises that's been just done in every single medium, cartoons, plays, I mean, Pez dispensers. It's the most marketed. It seems like the most marketed thing in history.
It sure is. Speaking of the Pez dispenser, it
Are-
is. Yeah. And actually, that started right at the beginning. L. Frank Baum, who wrote the novel in 1900, he wrote a socialist utopia, but ironically, he was a capitalist with a capital C, and he was constantly finding ways to market and remarket his work. And he actually merchandised the books, which was unusual for the time. There were dolls and there were comic books and there were like all kinds of toys and games kids could buy. And then there was a stage play in 1902, and that sparked a whole nother round of marketing. So yeah, the Oz collecting side of it has been around for 123 years.
It's so odd to think because back in that time, you didn't really see a lot of adaptations of books or just any kind of media, really. Everything was just, this is an original play. Nothing was really adapted back in the day, which seems really strange now. But there wasn't also that much, there wasn't that much media to adapt from. I mean, you would have really old, like, stage plays or Shakespeare. But to have an original like from 1900, which 150 years after the U.S. was basically around, it just seems like a very strange time as well to start adapting things. So how
Yeah.
was you were saying that he started merchandising and licensing, but how did he come to that, or did he approach studios or playwrights or companies, or did they approach him with it?
So L. Frank Baum was a jack of all trades, and actually, before he became an author, he was a playwright, and it was his idea to bring Oz to the stage. And he actually wrote a treatment for it, gave it to the production company he was working with. They read it, and they're like, "No," because at that time, Broadway was featuring a lot of is kind of pre-vaudeville variety shows where it was more vignettes tied together very loosely, lots of chorus girls, it was really geared toward adults. So they rewrote his work. It resembles the book in almost no way. And that's one of the things I loved about Baum. He was not uptight about people taking his work and reinventing it, which is why when people now are kind of like, no more remakes, you can't touch the classic. I disagree strongly with that. Even the author was okay with us reworking his work for a new medium. So I'm actually really excited to see what the next generation brings to Oz.
And was there a reason why he had changed it so much from the original work? I mean, obviously you have to cut things out. You have to, a lot of it's descriptions in books, but a lot of, especially like just the various different kind of immediately after the book was adapted to different mediums, a lot of it changed. And I don't know how much he had to do with each iteration of Oz when it came to, the movie but how much of a hand did he have in changing it? Like if when they wrote the movie, like did he have any input? He was dead by then, right?
He was. So Alfred Baum died in 1919, 20 years before MGM took a crack at it. And his family was involved in handing it over to them, but they didn't have a ton of creative control. But even after he passed, the publishing company appointed a new royal historian of Oz and allowed the Oz books to continue. So Oz is constantly revamping, reshaping, evolving. He didn't mind that at all. And, medium is the message, right? So if you're translating something from a book to the stage, that has to change in order for it to fit the medium. Wicked's another great example of this. Gregory Maguire's novel doesn't look anything like the Wicked stage play. And changing something from a book to a film or a play to a film, you have to adapt it to the medium that's telling the story. And animation is so wonderful in this way because it is boundless in terms of what can be done. There's no limitations. All you need is your imagination and a pencil.
And that's something that's very interesting about Oz, because you were saying about historians, and so I saw a little bit on your Instagram, which if you haven't seen it, go to the Oz vlog. Look, I'm just a casual Wizard of Oz fan, but I'm pretty sure I've scrolled through hours of your Instagram. It is just the most easy to watch, addicting thing, and I'm learning things that I never knew of, like that I actually like Wizard of Oz a lot. So it's just strange. So the Wizard of Oz historian is, you said it's passed down, I believe, right?
The Royal Historian of Oz title, which is the title L. Frank Baum gave himself as the author, after the first couple of books, because he only ever intended to write one Oz book, but as he went on, he framed it in the device that he was the royal historian and that Dorothy was actually sending him information from Oz to tell these stories. And when he passed, the title of Royal Historian of Oz was handed down to another author, Ruth Plumley Thompson. And that title just continued to pass down through all of the Oz authors. There are over 40 canonical Oz books. And if you Google that, you can find the order in which you should read them. So it just goes on. And those of us who call ourselves Oz historians are just, kind of experts in the area of knowing how all of this came to be.
So that's one of the most interesting things, though, that the Oz books continued without Baum, because you would think that just after he's done, because he wrote himself about, what was it, like 15, 19 books?
He wrote 14 full novels and one of short stories.
Yeah, so when it came to continuing it on, did he have a personal say in, I want this author to continue the story, or was it his family that gave creative permissions?
It was the publishing company that made the decision. He had actually written his last book. It was completed before he died, but it was not published until after. And then the conversation became, okay, what do we do here? Do we, is this the end of the story, or do we keep going? And they appointed Ruth Plumley Thompson after his passing to be the person to carry that forward.
And what a great legacy that is to have, and also such a burden. I mean, anytime you're taking over from any original author in any field, just if you're the next person, it seems very daunting. But maybe that was at a time where you could get away with that, because people knew authors, like authors were sort of rock stars at the time. But also, I don't think they really cared who was writing the books, as long as they saw that title, Wizard of Oz, whatever the next installment was.
And Baum was not precious about people taking it and moving on with it. But then again, when you look at Ruth Plumley Thompson's work, I wish they had appointed someone else. Her books are not my favorites. But what it did was it allowed Oz to continue being in the public consciousness. What people have forgotten about the Oz books is that they were the Harry Potter books of their time. They came out one a year. Kids clamored to know what happened next. The original book, though it's been banned several times, has never been out of publication in all of the 123 years. It's never ceased to be published. So it's a cultural phenomenon. It has continued to inspire so much creativity. And the MGM film really took that and then launched it into, iconography.
Yeah, and so we had Baum, who was the original historian. So we have you now, who's a historian. So how do we get from that point? I mean, to be mentioned with anybody in that to have a similar title, that must be a huge honor.
It is a huge honor. And I should emphasize the unofficialness of that title. That title was given to me by a fellow Oz historian, Ryan J. of Ryan J. Reviews. He is an Oz historian who has worked with the International Wizard of Oz Club for a very long time. I've been a member since I was 9 years old. And he was the first person to refer to me in that way. And I was a little nervous to pick up that mantle and run with it. But then I was like, you know what? I kind of pulled from some confidence and decided, yes, okay, I'll run with this. And it's been an amazing journey thus far. It really has.
So, what do you feel though? Because I mean, with that title, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, you said it's unofficial, but still, I mean, that's like the Queen of England, saying we're gonna unofficially knight you. You can't kneel, but you can stand up. Like it's still the same. Like I'm being knighted here. Like I have that title. Unofficial, so what? It's still got the word official in it. Historian. I mean, so what does that mean to you as far as carrying on this legacy of? Because what I do is I review I do retrospectives of cartoons. I don't like to say reviews because I'm not a critic. I don't have that kind of education. I do retrospectives. I think that it's not even preserving what I do, but I'm just letting people know I'm giving it a second life. And for you, I think you're doing something much more noble where you actually are preserving a history. It's sort of like this oral history where even though we have all this video and all this documentation, I think it's just as important, though, to have an actual passing down of knowledge from people. I mean, what does that mean to you to have that responsibility?
It's it's an honor, honestly. I've been a fan all of my life. I've been collecting now for 26 years, and it is an honor to pick up that mantle and walk with it and to bring more people into the fold, because I truly believe that even classics and things we love, if we are not careful to continue talking about it and keep it in the public consciousness, it will eventually be lost to time. And much like your cartoon retrospectives, which are bringing about a renaissance for these cartoons that have been long since shelved, it is a responsibility that I take very seriously to teach the history, talk about the importance of carrying this legacy forward. I think there's so much to be found in the Oz books, so much wisdom and wit. And, I don't want those things to go away. And the only way we keep them going is if we introduce them to the next generation. So that's where I feel my responsibility really lies. Educating, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about Oz as well, and helping to carry the legacy forward to the next generation.
Yeah, it's so great, and I want to start getting into the cartoon a little bit because we have people who are chomping at the bit asking you questions that I love. So let's go ahead and get to just a couple comments in here. Marcus Blackwell says, let's see here. Question about the lore of Oz. We will get to that one, Marcus. But Marcus does say, not only are you preserving history, you're keeping the lore alive as well. Which, Aww. Yeah, that's something that you don't really think about because, especially when I was watching, I rewatched the original Wizard of Oz, and I guess we can kind of segue into that. The original Wizard of Oz, I think people they see it once or twice as a kid, and they have this idea of what it is. And I had the same thing. I remember Somewhere Over the Rainbow, just going down the yellow brick road. I remember a lot of the beats, a lot of the stronger points. But what I didn't realize, what I didn't remember, is really the thing that shocked me most was how really funny it is. Like the movie was like borderline hilarious. Just a lot of the phrasing. It's sort of done in that vaudevillian, almost Abbott and Costello kind of cadence. How they talk to each other. I love Dorothy is very bossy. She's very bratty.
Hold on, time out. We are going to reframe that in the feminist way. She's not bossy. She's assertive. Thank you.
She's assertive. And it's funny because what I found most interesting, because I know in the book she's supposed to be a child, like a very young child. Yes. And she's supposed to be a teenager in the movie.
Very interestingly, they originally wrote her to be 16 or 17. The original script had a subplot with a very innocent romance between Dorothy and Hunk's character, who ends up being the Scarecrow. Mm-hmm. And they tried that out for a little bit and it didn't work. So they pulled back and they took that. She originally had this long flowing blonde wig, lots of makeup. They took that off. They put her in, the brown pigtails. They put her in a breast binder and a corset. And they attempted to make her look 12 years old. That was the goal they were going for. I do not think they achieved that. And I don't think, I think Judy had a gravitas that showed her age. So I think she comes across as the 16-year-old she was. And so they were attempting to bring her age back down, but to me it didn't read that way.
Yeah, and even if they did, you said with the breast binding and the different kind of things to her body, she has, I mean, for being 16 at the time, she has a grown woman face.
Yes, she does.
Like there was something about, of course, back then they always say people age differently. I mean, she looked like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Raiders, she looked like Jim Otto. He was the center for the then Oakland Raiders, but he was like,
sports. Yes, I'm sports with you.
Yeah, I can see all your football memorabilia in the back. But yeah, but I was the movie was just really funny. The cadence, I like a lot of the wordplay. I think that's something that doesn't get a lot of notoriety, and they just have such great chemistry.
You really do. And they had all worked together before. Jack Haley and Judy Garland had done a film together. Burt Lahr and Jack Haley were actually close friends. They were each other's children's godparents. They Ray Bolger had worked with them before. The songwriters had written stuff specifically for Burt Lahr many times, which is why they actually gave him a second song. They loved writing for him. So they were familiar with each other. They had all worked together. And Ray Bolger, Burt Lahr, and Jack Haley were household names at the time, while Judy Garland was not. So she was the new kid on the block, actually. And which is funny because now if you went up to someone and asked them what they think of Ray Bolger, I don't think there are a lot of people who could tell you who he is. But they were very, very popular at the time, and they were actually the big names. And Judy Garland was the brand new kid starting out. And she had had successful films and radio appearances, but she was not a big smash hit yet. So this was her breakout role. And they did have great chemistry. And Ray Bolger and Judy Garland stayed friends for the rest of her life. And they built, there's a lot of rumor that they did not get along on the set, which is not true. They had really strong bonds. The only person Judy Garland expressed not being fond of was Jack Haley. He was a bit of a curmudgeon. He was miserable in his costume. Absolutely miserable. So yeah, I think they did have great chemistry. And I think the cartoon actually captured that, which is really one of the things I love about it.
Yeah, and we'll get to the cartoon. I'm just trying to pick your brain with everything right now. I've been chomping at the bit.
Heaven for me.
So I want to just ask one more question though, because you were mentioning about a lot of the misconceptions. Is it the age, or what is it about the Wizard of Oz that so many people hear these rumors about? Because I've saw on your Instagram as well. You have, it seems like every other video is you dispelling the asbestos poppy fields, the hanging munchkin. There's always these misconceptions. What is it about the Wizard of Oz?
It's a perfect storm of because Judy Garland's life ended so tragically. I think there's a lot of fascination in terms of the lore there. I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of latent ableism when we talk about the Munchkins. People believed those stories so readily about how rowdy they were and out of control, when the truth is that's a gross exaggeration. And there were a lot of injuries and mishaps on the set. That part of it is true. There was no oversight. The Hollywood studio system was a wild west of no government intervention. Nobody was watching out for child labor. Nobody was watching out for safety regulations. And this was a film that was experimenting with special effects that had not been done before. So they were inventing the wheel while riding on it. And they made a lot of mistakes and a lot of people got hurt. So I think it's easy for people then to believe all these outlandish things, because there were outlandish things that happened. But not everything you read on Google is true, kids. Be careful. Yes, we have access to all of the information in the universe at the end of your fingertips, but it's buried under misinformation. So do your research. Read books as well as researching on the internet.
Or listen to an Oz historian. This is the perfect example of why we need Oz historians. Exactly it.
So happy to pick up this mantle for sure. I have an entire list on my TikTok of I have an entire playlist just called Oz Myths Debunked, and it's like 300 videos deep at this point.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. And so let's go ahead and transition here. So, Wizard of Oz, you said you were about, was it 9 years old when you first discovered the movie?
I was 2 when I first discovered the movie.
Two.
And actually, my fans on TikTok have helped me to conceptualize why it stuck so much at that point. And actually, having gone back and thought about it, so my grandfather died in 1990, and the 50th anniversary had just happened in 1989. So my grandmother had the VHS tape. Right after he passed, 2 weeks later, our house burned. So we were displaced from our house, and we had to go live with our grandmother while it was being repaired, who had just lost her husband. And while we were staying there, she showed us The Wizard of Oz for the first time. She had the 50th anniversary VHS tape, which I still have right there. And I was hooked. And I think looking back now, that trauma and upheaval is really what made it stick for me. It just makes me feel so comforted and so good. And I've never stopped loving it. I would finish the VHS tape, hit the rewind button, and start it right over again. It's just, it's my comfort place.
Yeah, and you're gonna like this segue. In 1990, the year the Wizard of Oz cartoon came out. Let's go ahead and take some comments really quick. We're actually starting to get kind of full here. I've been neglecting you folks. Sorry about that. All right, let's go ahead and look at. We have Lowell Lucas Jr. Howdy, Lowell. What are your thoughts on Return to Oz? I personally love it, especially the Gnome King.
I don't know if you can see my Return to Oz shelf right here. I've got 2 shelves of Return to Oz stuff. I adore Return to Oz. It's the closest thing to a proper adaptation of L. Frank Baum's novels that we have on film so far. It's the closest adaptation. And even the darkness, which I know people are kind of taken aback by, is, there is darkness built into the Oz books that isn't in the 1939 film, which does have dark moments, but the tone is very light. So I love Return to Oz. Thank you for the question. And the Gnome King is awesome.
And
and a little bit LGBTQIA plus, the way he rocks those ruby reds. Yes. Yes.
And there's something I don't know if you're familiar with Don Bluth. He's
yes, of course.
Fievel goes, Fievel, American Tail, all those movies. But he had a really good point that kind of makes me think of Return to Oz. He says that a lot of his films were very dark, like All Dogs Go to Heaven. There was a lot of heaven and hell, a lot of loss, mourning. He says that for kids, a lot of these Disney movies have problems because you get to see these really happy moments, but the payoff doesn't equal what the tragedy is. So he's saying that you had to have somebody die in a movie if you want that jubilation that feels earned at the end, which feels kind of like Return to Oz. Like, there really is a lot of darkness, but those highs at the end of the movie and during when they make friends, when they really accomplish something, it feels earned. And that's something that a lot of The Wizard of Oz, and I think a lot of movies and kids shows in general, they don't earn that ending. They don't earn that happy feeling. And Return to Oz, I mean, you said it was dark, and it really is. I love the sands, the deadly sands, right?
Yes, the deadly desert.
The deadly desert. I mean, I love all that stuff. And when they escape something, you feel like, wow, that really was worth it.
And that was close. And actually, I would argue as well for the 1939 Judy Garland film. I think Dorothy's journey really is a journey of, is a coming of age story. And no coming of age comes without pain. So Judy's film and the experiences Dorothy goes through that, I think the payoff of feeling at home and feeling self-actualized when you return I think that payoff is really, really satisfying.
Yeah, I mean it's just, I mean, like I said, I was rewatching it and everything felt like it actually is a little bit of a scary movie, the original Wizard of Oz too. I mean, those flying monkeys when they actually kidnap Dorothy, that is actually a very terrifying scene. And I just forgot how everything looked. You just have it in your mind because you watched it, like I said, as a kid, and you think, oh, the monkeys were silly. They're not silly. They're just grown men. It's like Planet of the Apes almost, but blue.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So getting to the Wizard of Oz, let's go ahead and take a couple more questions here. Marcus Blackwell, how did they accomplish effects like the Wicked Witch melting and the flying monkeys? Is there anything I can read or watch about behind the scenes of the film?
Hold on now. So, especially if you're interested in special effects, if you're interested in the behind the scenes of the entire movie, I would recommend The Road to Oz by Jay Scarfone and William Stillman. This is an amazing book. As you can see, I have it earmarked everywhere. It's an incredible resource. If you're interested in specifically the special effects, the MGM special effects master, Arnold Gillespie, actually did write a book, a memoir that was published after his passing. It's called The Wizard of MGM. And he actually, what I love about this book, he actually has his original order sheets and notes in the back. So if you're interested, for example, in those flying monkeys, look here. There's a whole order sheet here and reference for how that was accomplished, how much those effects cost, what they needed to accomplish it. The flying monkeys, by the way, they achieved that with a mixture of people in costumes on wires and puppets. And there are still a couple of those puppets out there that collectors have, not me. And they're the Wicked Witch melting. They put her in an oversized hat and an oversized dress, which they pinned to the floor. They shot up wind and dry ice, and they lowered her slowly into the floor. And she slowly like takes her dress off and like leaves the hat over where the trapdoor is. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, and we got one from Andrew DeFilippo. He says hi.
Hi.
Rennie the Space Guy. The greatest adaptation of this story is, of course, the Lego version from the Toys to Life game they did. And that kind of makes me wonder, though. So do you focus mostly just on the television and the plays and the books, or do you actually go into the video game sphere or the cartoon sphere regularly?
I do go in regularly. I like what Lego did with it. It's very cute. And I hope Lego does more with Oz. I think we are lacking as collectors an entire Lego Oz set. We have minifigures, and the Lego Dimensions characters, but we lack a set. And I have a bone to pick with you, Lego. What the heck? Let's go. But yeah, I love video game adaptations. I love cartoons. As a matter of fact, you'll find TikTok in one of the Mickey and the Magic Paintbrush or something like that came out like 15 years ago. You'll find TikTok from Return to Oz in that. So yeah, I think I'm all about all things Oz are for me. I love anything Oz in any sphere.
And you're going to be happy for this. Marcus Blackwell says, I'm going to check those books out at my local library.
Fantastic. Thank you, Marcus. Please
the
do.
Next Oz historian. You just created
Let me know
one.
what you think. They're everywhere. And I've met several, and I've gotten letters from kids who I am convinced will be picking up what I'm doing now for the next generation. They're out there. They're making themselves right now. And it's so wonderful because we need them. I don't want this to leave. I don't want to leave this behind and have it disappear. I want it to keep going.
And I agree with everything in that statement. I just cannot believe that kids are writing letters.
I know. I have a P.O. box, guys. Link in my link tree in my Instagram and TikTok if you ever want to write me a letter. But yeah, I get cards and letters all the time. And the thing that I hear the most is I felt othered in some way in my community. Oz made me feel connected. And that is such a beautiful thing.
All right, and we're going to take one more question here really quick. We got Marcus. Marcus he loves all this Wizard of Oz. Lowell. Let's take a look. Have you seen the illustrated works of Oz by Thomas Blackshear? He's my mentor and has a love of the Wicked Witch.
Thomas Blackshear. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up and see if I have it in the archive here. So I'm sorry I can't answer that right off the top of my head, but I will look into it and let you know.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the cartoons. So 1990, Deke Entertainment. Deke has worked on everything basically in the 80s and 90s. Strawberry Shortcake, Sailor Moon, Sonic the Hedgehog, and I'm sure other cartoons that don't start with the letter S, but those are the three off the top of my head. So I was talking to you a little bit before, and you said that you actually watched this growing up.
I sure did.
So you watched it as it was airing week to week?
I did watch it while it was airing, and then it was in reruns for a long time. I would say for like 3 or 4 years, it ran in reruns on various networks, and then it went off the air. And for a long time, and then, so we had, does anybody remember video rental stores? So back in the day, you could rent VHS tapes, and I would rent this one all the time. This is the
Wow.
Yes. OG.
Oh, I love that. And it's all shrink wrapped. I mean, I'm no collector, but that is a beautiful piece right there.
So there was a video rental store in our local Stop and Shop, and they had just this one, and it has 2 episodes on it: The Lion That Squeaked and We're Not in Kansas Anymore, or The Ruby Slipper Slip Up. And I went in and rented this like every week. And then that store shut down. And that was the last I saw of it for a very long time. And then one day we got a new premium channel on our cable called Toon Disney.
Mm-hmm.
And this was back in the day when you had on your television a TV guide that you could flip ahead and see what was coming on. So we had just gotten Toon Disney, and I had no idea what cartoons they had on it. And as official cartoon aficionado, I wanted to know. So I scrolled ahead on the TV guide, and at 4 a.m. on Sunday into Monday morning, they had the Wizard of Oz. And I was like, which Wizard of Oz is this? Because there are obviously more than one Wizard of Oz cartoon. But the description sounded very much like this show. And I was like, well, I have to see it. But I wasn't allowed to watch TV at 4 a.m., as you can imagine. And my alarm clock, I had this old-fashioned bell alarm clock. And if I had tried to set it, it would have woken up my entire household. So I was on a mission. I stayed up all night. I did not fall asleep. I stayed under my covers reading. And I woke up at 4 a.m., turned on the television. I used a VHS tape to tape it off the TV, and sure enough, it was this show. And I stayed up for 13 consecutive weeks and taped the entire series off of the TV.
Wow. And, that must be, your parents must be mad. They don't want you staying up at 4 a.m., but they must be so happy you weren't out gallivanting, drag racing. I don't know why. I think you grew up in the 1950s, like Greece.
I was only 12 years old or so, but yeah, I was definitely not. I'm a total nerd, and I'm happy to admit that I'm a total nerd. So I stayed up for 13 weeks, got the entire series on VHS tape, and then they stopped playing it shortly after. And I didn't see it again. I had those tapes, I rewatched them, but then one day I was walking through Rite Aid and I saw them on DVD, and I was like, wait a minute.
These things are drawn to you somehow. I don't know. I go to a Rite Aid and I see Die Hard, Die Hard 2, Live Free or Die Hard. You see The Wizard of Oz. You have a special gift.
And this DVD release is very strange. The menu is narrated by Inspector Gadget for reasons I don't know.
He actually did a lot of the Deke shows. They would have him do. He also did the Super Mario Brothers show DVD menus for some reason.
Side note: why haven't we gotten a dark noir adaptation of Inspector Gadget? We need one.
Oh, we have. It was Gadget Boy.
That's a thing?
Well, no, it's not actually dark. The second live action movie was a little dark. They had evil Inspector Gadget. I think it was the second movie, but they had Gadget Boy, which was just Inspector Gadget as a little boy. And then instead of Penny, they had an adult version of Penny, and they had the dog, and they had instead of Dr. Claw, it was a female.
Huh. I have to check that out. So the cartoon is one of those things that if I asked people about it, they were like, no, I didn't see that growing up, but it stuck so much for me. I remembered those episodes beat for beat, and they're so wonderful. And what a voice cast. And I'm so excited we're getting into this.
Yes. Now let's go ahead, because we have been setting up so long. I'm just fat. I could just listen to you talk about something. I have no idea what I'm talking about for hours, which is basically what we're doing. But we'll go ahead really quick, get to the comments one more time. Let's take a look. Marcus Blackwell, I didn't know that the 1990 cartoon was popular enough to have a VHS.
Yeah, it wasn't, but once it went off the air after one season, the only way then to make money off of it is to sell the VHS tapes. And my parents, as the folks at the VHS rental store, did offer to sell them to us. That's how often we rented that. But my parents like, nah, that's okay. We'll just keep renting it. But they did merchandise this show in a very limited way. They released a lot of baby items. There were a lot of baby bottles and bibs and stuff like that. But it didn't take off the way that I guess you would hope, like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles took off and there's merchandise for everything. We were so robbed of action figures for this show.
So there were actually action figures, from what I understand.
There were?
That's what I read.
There are, I have never seen them.
I will have to find the article I found. I'll have to send it to you after.
Please do. I've never seen action figures for these. If they're out there, they're very rare because I've never seen them. But we still actually have people today making merch, fans today. Joe Shipaw, one of my favorite Oz artists, just made these
Wow.
beautiful keychains that you can get.
Those are lovely.
I got two of them because I was like, I know I'm gonna mess one of them up.
Well, of course,
Uh,
when you're collecting, you have to have two everything, one to keep and then one to show off.
Actually, yes.
Trust me, I don't have my camera on, but I'm in the same boat as you.
The good news is the art was preserved, so there are animated cells out there. I actually have one sitting right behind me. I don't know if you can see it, but so unfortunately they didn't merchandise this a lot, but the reason they put them out on VHS tape was to make a couple extra bucks off of it. So thank you for your question, Marcus.
Now, are you so have you ever done any consulting work for anything Oz related?
Yes. Currently working on a couple of documentaries. I've done voiceover, I've done consulting, I'm writing a book, working on some stuff. So, yeah, the Oz work is ongoing all the time.
Oh, I love that. So is that your full-time job or is this
I
just
wish. That's the dream. I would like it someday to be my full-time job, but I still hold down a day job, constantly hustling.
Yeah, and it's so hard. I mean, because I've seen a lot of the things you do where you were at a book at a oh my gosh, I almost called it a I was saying a book convention, a library, or a
I was
bookstore.
actually, it's a bookstore in New York called Books of Wonder. It's a staple in the Oz community. The owner, Peter Glassman, recreated the first edition books in hardcover books. They're beautiful. And he released them and they are amazing. And his bookstore has a lot of antique Oz books available. So we did a whole panel on the Oz books at Books of Wonder, which was dream come true territory for me.
The other people that were on that panel. So I imagine the Oz community, I mean, it's worldwide, but it must be a still relatively small community where you bump into the same people everywhere you go.
The people who were on the panel with me are fellow Oz historians. Brady Schwind, who is working on a project called the Lost Art of Oz project. He's gathering the original illustrations back together and finding out where they are. And Tara and MK of Down the Yellow Brick Pod, they host a Wizard of Oz podcast, and they are also extremely talented Oz historians. So, believe it or not, it's a pretty robust community.
Yeah, and I mean, if you are into Wizard of Oz, I mean, you're in for a pound, in for a penny. It's you got to pretty much be all or nothing. And I was surprised. I could not believe. I mean, I knew there was people who, were collectors or loved Wizard of Oz, but on my Instagram, if anybody, the YouTube and the Instagram don't cross over a lot. It's funny to see, but it's the goose. It's the goose. The Wizard of Oz clips that I've posted have gotten the most traction out of anything I've posted. And
It
it's
does not surprise me, especially because I've had so many people reach out and say, there was this cartoon I watched when I was a kid, but I can't find it and I don't know. And I was like, oh, is it this one? And they're like, oh my gosh. So, like, it's a reawakening almost.
Yeah, and we're going to go ahead and now get into the cartoon. So I wanted to talk a little bit about. So if nobody has seen my video, which wouldn't surprise me, oh, thank you. I go into length about the introduction because that is one of the most fascinating pieces. I think that's what you could consider the most canon in the entire show. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it is the Dorothy wakes up in her, and I there's so much about that introduction I love, how it's black and white in Kansas and then it transitions to color. She sees the ruby red sliver sparkle. She actually uses There's No Place Like Oz to get back to Oz. All her friends are there. Glinda says the Wicked Witch has returned. And here's the thing, the biggest thing is that reincarnation of the witch. So they put her together with sticks and stones. They don her cloak, her broomstick, and her hat, and she comes back to life. That's very interesting to me. Now, from what I understand, just from my small amount of research, so I'm glad that you're here, the Wicked Witch only makes her appearance in like the first book and then as a ghost later on. Is that right?
As a ghost? I do not believe she reappears as a ghost in the original 14 novels. I'd have to go back and reread. I don't recall that. she's only in the first book and only for a couple of chapters. She's mentioned, but you see her for the first time in chapter 12. She's really not a main villain of the book series. She is an obstacle that Dorothy has to overcome to get to the end of her journey, but she's not a villain of the whole. I would say the Gnome King is the main villain of the book series. She's a very minor character, but in order to give the film a 3-act structure for the MGM film, they were like, okay, we need to bookend this with one villain, and she made the most sense. And she was very threatening, the way Margaret Hamilton played her. And Tress MacNeille, who picks up the voice for this series, does such a good job. She's menacing, but she also has a lot of comedy. She's narrow-minded, she's just all in on this one thing. She wants revenge, she wants the slippers, she wants world domination, and she's going to do anything she has to get it. And she's fabulous. I love her performance in this.
And for those of you, Tress MacNeille, you might know as Babs Bunny from Tiny Toon Adventures and Dot from Animaniacs, among the litany of dozens and dozens of voices she's performed over the years. And I mean, everything about her is hilarious. Like, just the way she and Truckle, her flying monkey sidekick, the way she abuses him. My favorite line in the entire show is when they're spying on Dorothy and she's dressed as the fortune teller and Truckle comes up behind eating a... That's what was so funny to me, that sometimes they slip in contemporary references. Like, so one time they the lion says that to defeat the witch they're going to need a bazooka. It's the most out of context, out of place, but it's hilarious because it's something that's so common said in modern day that you don't even realize, well, this is supposed to potentially take place in the 1930s, 1940s, and they're talking about bazookas.
I wonder about that because the 1939 film was set in contemporary times. It was set in the 1939. And I'm wondering if they set the cartoon in modern times in 1990, because when Dorothy starts digging through her closet in We're Not in Kansas Anymore, she's throwing out like jean jackets and like stuff with bangles on it. And I'm like, that looks her clothes look very 90s to me. So she always rocks this gingham number, but she's got jean jackets on the sides.
Yeah. And I was thinking like, that's sort of, oh man, what's his not Jimmy Dean, Dean Martin, or not Dean Martin. What's his who's the young kid, the greaser who was in those Got Milk commercials, and he had the slick back hair. I believe he died in a car crash. Oh man.
That's James Dean.
James Dean. That was sort of he was around that time, right? Didn't they have maybe not jean jackets, but they had the leather jackets, right? Those greaser jackets. Yeah. But so anyway, that's what I was wanted to ask you about. So the witch being reincarnated, I know that you said she's just in a few chapters, but the thing about the Wizard of Oz that I always found interesting was it's one of those stories where the more information you're given, the less you understand. Like the ruby red slippers, they hold great power. What does that mean? I don't know. The Wizard of Oz, there's a little more to him, but really what I didn't understand in the cartoon, or why is there such a great significance to him?
To the wizard. So I'm not actually sure why they decided to go that route. In the film, he's pretty much proven to be a humbug. He has no power. He doesn't really do anything. But he's a likable character. You know, he's an affable old guy. And I get why they brought him back and canonized him, in the aftermath. So, they clean him up. They make him more of a likable, buffoon. He doesn't have any real power. He's just kind of looking to have something to do, which is why he became the Wizard of Oz, according to this. But he can't help himself. He can't help the people of Oz. He's just kind of the old man character who leaves them clues, and he's the driving force behind the continued journey. They're trying to rescue him from, apparently he can't get out of his balloon. The witch can then attack him if he gets out of his balloon. He left the Scarecrow in charge. The Scarecrow kind of bungles it. And while they're traveling, I'm like, who's taking over now? Who's in charge now? I feel like Glinda's kind of filling in a little bit. Glinda's also useless. But what I love about this cartoon, you don't really need to be buried in the lore or buried in the canon to enjoy it. It's just fun. It's fun. The dynamics between the characters are really believable. They don't always get along. They're on each other's nerves. And it's so fun.
And that's one of the things that I really loved about it was you have the 1939 movie, which is its own thing. But you don't really get to see a lot of interactions outside of their journey. And here they're still on another journey, but you get to see a lot more dynamics between just the Scarecrow and the Lion, or just Dorothy and the Tin Man, or just Dorothy. And I also like that Dorothy and the witch have a lot of interaction between each other. I mean, there's a couple scenes where she puts her hands on Dorothy, and she can't really do anything because of the power of the slippers. Which, I mean, the thing I like, of course, I thought it was funny, but I love the lore because if you take out the humor in it, there's a lot to process. Like the ruby red slippers, those are apparently, as we saw in the movie, they can transport onto, materialize onto Dorothy's feet. But they also move from Dorothy to the Lion to let them know that Dorothy's in trouble. And they also are able to, Truckle put on the slippers at one point, and he was able to use them to zap the witch and to keep her at bay. So
it's one of my favorite episodes, and I love that the slippers have their own intuition. They're like, oh, we gotta bounce. This is not a good situation. So they protect themselves. They know whose feet they want to be on. They kind of almost choose their own master. But also, whenever the witch thinks she gets them, she is ready to unleash true terror on everyone around her. One of the things I like about the way this show treats the Ruby Slippers, as opposed to, say, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, the Boomerang cartoon, they're not the solution to every problem, because Dorothy has all of this power, but she doesn't really know how to wield it. So she will ask the Ruby Slippers for something, but if she's not clear enough, or if there was another solution to this that she just didn't explore, they don't just hand her the easy way out. And so they're not the answer to every question. And sometimes her friends ask her to use them and she goes, hold up, but that could actually get us in more trouble than we're in now. So I like that about them, because you could easily just lean on that and say, oh, she's got the ruby slippers. Here's the way out of this problem. But she doesn't have that option all the time. So I think when she's asking for something genuine and when she's really in a corner, the ruby slippers accommodate her. But if there's possibly a better way out, I think they hold her to account and they're like, no, we're not solving this problem for you.
Yeah, and that's one of the more interesting things about how, I had mentioned it in the video too, there's actual logic to a lot of the problems here. And like you were saying, Dorothy knows the power that they're unpredictable, which seems strange because if they're supposed to hold great power and they appear on Dorothy and they help her, it just seems like you never know the motive behind the actual slippers, which... That's the thing with Oz. You just never know the motive behind anybody. Like, you're just told, well, this is the good witch, this is the bad witch. But there's so much confusion and just so much uncertainty about everything in that world.
I think the shoes actually have a sense of sentience. And actually, I think their motivation, if I had to guess, being that they were forged from stones that came from Oz, I think their motivation is to protect Oz as best they can. Now, they can obviously be forced into, and the lion surrenders them. That's how Truckle gets them. And I love this about the lion. He's the weak link of the four, and they all know it. And he gets on their nerves so much. He's always tempted. Even in the second episode, the witch captures him and says, I'll give you your medal of courage back, but you have to give me Dorothy. Mm-hmm. And he's tempted for a moment. He thinks about it. They know he's the weak link. He also steps up a lot of the times for his friends as well. But when the witch is torturing the other three, trying to get the ruby slippers from the lion, he gives up. He's like, all right, no, this is out of hand. Take them. And he wishes the slippers to the witch, but they divert themselves to Truckle. And I think, they're stalling. They can't stop the wish, but they can maybe stall it a little bit.
Yeah, and then there's that episode is a really good one because that's the one where the lion goes back and he poses as a flying monkey. I think that's the same episode. And I love what he does. So they're all on a line. The lion is dressed as one of the flying monkeys, and Truckle is coming down to select somebody to go help him on the quest the witch gives him. And the lion knows he's going to be spotted and outed because his face is a different color, so he holds his breath and he turns blue. That's blue. Really funny. Like, that's the kind of things I really appreciate about the show when I say there's logic. Like, there's things where, of course, that's cartoon logic, but it makes sense, in a cartoony way. But the same way that when they're in the desert, Dorothy can't click her heels together because they're in the sand, and so she has to put them on her hands. And then even that, like, because I mean, I know we were talking about the funny part, but the lore is the whole thing that gets me into this show. So does that mean? I mean, if you can use them on your hands, it just feels like it opens up this whole world of possibilities. And let me ask you this, because concerning the Wizard of Oz, just as a standalone, that makes sense. But when in like the Oz community, is there a consensus like what is the true sequel? Because I know Return to Oz is sort of the spiritual successor-ish. I mean, this one seems more like a direct sequel. I know there's dozens of attempts at sequels with Jack Pumpkin and everybody. So is there a consensus as to, is there like an actual canonical sequel, or is it just sort of these are branching paths?
Everything. So the Oz books are their own canon. The 39 film has its own canon. Wicked is its own canon. So the Oz community has had to accept that there are just all these branches of Oz that go in their own directions. Return to Oz is considered the sequel to the book. In terms of sequels to the 1939 film, this series definitely counts. And canonically, Boomerang produced a cartoon which is technically under the Warner Brothers umbrella, so that would be considered a sequel. And the Tom and Jerry sequel movie is technically a canonical sequel because it's also made by Warner Brothers. So, which is actually unironically an amazing film.
Is it really?
So, Tom and Jerry Back to Oz is a watch that is worth the watch. It is so good. The music is so fun. The cast is great. And it is a really good continuation, and it uses the Gnome King as the villain. The Ruby Slippers, in terms of canon, are difficult because the slippers are only ever in the first book. They disappear over the Deadly Desert when Dorothy flies home, and that's the end of them. We don't see them again. So she does get a ruby belt in later books. Ozma does, that can do basically the same thing as the slippers, but the silver shoes are only ever in that first book, and we really don't get a full picture of what they do. So the lore is kind of open to interpretation and artistic license, which they ran with for this.
Is there so you were saying a lot of the canonical things were done by Warner Brothers. Is that what's considered in the Oz community as canon? If it's done by Warner Brothers, that means it's part of the timeline?
It's part of the film timeline because Warner Brothers owns the 1939 film, owns the rights. So Turner produced this cartoon. Turner was there was some buyouts and some merging, and they became Warner Brothers essentially. So Warner Brothers owns the rights to the 1939 film. So anything they produce to do with Oz is technically canonical.
Okay, wow, I've never heard that because of the studio that's handling it. So if let's just say for some reason Warner Brothers loses the rights and somebody else, Universal, picks it up. So is that a whole new timeline, or does it if they say, if Universal says we own this now, we're doing a direct sequel to the 1939 Wizard of Oz, but it's not Warner Brothers, how is that considered?
It would still, I mean, if they own the rights and they're making new stories, not unlike how Star Wars went from being Lucasfilms to Disney, and now they're determining where the canon is, it would follow that same logic.
Wow. And is that the consensus around the community? Because I imagine there's people who find, they want Return to Oz a more faithful sequel to be that continuation. Well, I'm sure there's people who would see this and say, well, this is a direct sequel because it deals, let's say, directly after the aftermath where she goes right back. Is there like a consensus there, or is...
Yeah, again, the consensus is like, okay, this is the sequel to the book, this is the sequence to the film, the sequel to the film, and they kind of all have their own branches. Universal owns Wicked, so that will have its own thing when the films come out next year. So
let's go ahead and get to a comment really quick. Marcus Blackwell, huge fan of yours now.
Thank you, Marcus. Appreciate you.
Question: was Oz inspired by Wonderland? I see a few distinct contrasts, but also similarities, like both worlds supposedly being dreams, but also contrasts like Wonderland being more outright hostile.
L. Frank Baum definitely was influenced by Lewis Carroll, but fun fact, and spoiler alert for the books, Oz is not a dream in the books. The dreams idea was made for the film. They didn't believe that audiences would buy, a post-Depression era audiences would buy the fantasy elements. Fantasy films up until that point were not entirely successful, so they decided to ground it in realism by making it a dream, but it was not a dream in the books.
Interesting. And we're going to go ahead and get to Lowell Lucas Jr. How do you feel about, you're going to love this, how do you feel about Wicked? Also, why is there no coverage of the Wicked Witch's sister?
I love Wicked. I adore Wicked. I really do. Wicked is amazing. I How do I feel about the fact that we don't really get to hear about the Wicked Witch of the East?
Hmm.
There are some works that have taken that on. For example, Roger S. Baum, L. Frank Baum's great great grandson, writes Oz books now, and he wrote a book called The Lion of Oz and the Badge of Courage, and the main villain in that is the Witch of the East. And obviously, Wicked gives us more of a glimpse at the Witch of the East as well. So there is stuff out there. It exists.
Do So since they have that book regarding the Wicked Witch of the East, or the Witch of the East, sorry, I don't know why I apologize to you. But does it give any more insight then onto the ruby slippers? Because that was always something that I found curious about. How I know the ruby slippers don't have any power, but their power isn't explained fully, or their origin necessarily. But if the Witch of the East, is she evil in the books, or
Yes.
so? That's curious to me that somebody evil had those slippers on, and we didn't really get to see any use of the power from that wielder.
Well, she had enslaved all of Munchkin Land. And I think one of the things that shows again the sentience of the slippers is that it did not allow her to conquer all of Oz. She was only able to conquer this one quadrant. So she had conquered Munchkin Land and enslaved them. And when Dorothy's house lands on her, they're liberated. That's why they're celebrating. So yeah, she's bad news bears over there. But and when we return to Oz in the cartoon, again, the Munchkins are just jubilant, but they're basically like, this doesn't feel like our business, though. Like, y'all go handle this. Poor
Yeah,
Dorothy. She's always getting summoned to fix something.
and it's really, I was thinking about how, okay, they celebrate Dorothy and the Scarecrow and everybody, of course, at the original end of Wizard of Oz, and then everybody's so happy when she's back. But like the wizard, she did kill the Wicked Witch of the East and the Wicked Witch of the West, both accidentally, which seems like, once is an accident, twice. I don't know what your intent really is here. But it's strange how her and the wizard are so celebrated for doing nothing, just like almost for being outsiders and coming in and accidentally stumbling, into their good graces. It's just a very odd celebration of these two. One of them a phony, and the other one just who's falling up.
I think, honestly, the Wizard Reads is such a believable political type figure. He's just really convincing and charming. So everyone's like, yeah, he's probably got our best intentions at heart. And Dorothy actually does help. She is invested in helping when she comes back. And when they explain all the problems they've had, she actually is really committed to sticking it out, even though she does have breakdowns and moments where she's like, I am exhausted. I can't do this anymore. That episode again, showing Dorothy like having an emotional breakdown and starting to cry when they fail to rescue the wizard again, and she's exhausted and just wants to go home and just wants to be done with this, and is that weakness allows the witch to trick her and send her to a fake Kansas and almost undo the whole thing.
I know that was a really interesting. I love that just that clip of the witch blowing up Dorothy's house. That's hilarious to me. It's a fake one. So for anybody who hasn't seen the episode, Dorothy wishes to go back to Kansas, and she is transported there where her aunt and uncle are, and it's a ruse done by the witch and Truckle to get the ruby slippers from her. And it's really cool to see her back there. But the only complaint I would have is that it wasn't done in black and white, that scene.
Well, she wasn't really in Kansas.
Wow, and real Kansas isn't black and white. Look at you being the ever-present eye. Let's go ahead and go to a comment really quick. Lowell Lucas Jr. I don't know if we answered this one, so I'm going to ask it again really quick. What were your thoughts on the Wizard of Oz anime on HBO back in 1988? It was 52 episodes and had other characters interact like the Scarecrow and Jack the Pumpkinhead.
It's a great series, and what I love about it is it starts off really deep in the book canon. And then it slowly drifts into Uncanny Valley, like weird subplots, because those first couple of books were in public domain, but the rest weren't. So then they had to start veering off into like original territory. So it was really fun. And I'm glad that it exists because it's a great cartoon and it does, it's a great anime and it does a good job telling the Oz book stories. And they are all available on Blu-ray and on Amazon Prime. So definitely, if you haven't seen those episodes, check those out.
That's when you say click the link below and use the code word Tori.
Yeah, I wish I had a code to give you guys, but I don't.
And then we have one from Ryan J. Hello, Ryan J. Welcome.
Ryan, I love you.
Which of Baum's Oz books, aside from number 1, would you like to see adapted to screen?
Emerald City of Oz, for sure.
Emerald City of Oz. There you go. So I kind of had a question about this because I want your input because I really like this. I've seen a lot of Wizard of Oz cartoons, mostly cartoons, and they're really good. And really quick, a fun fact about, Oz Kids, I'm sure, where it's just...
Oh, yes, I do.
So there's, and I'm not sure if I read this wrong, so isn't there Zeb is one of Dorothy's cousins?
Yep, and they're married in the Oz Kids series.
Okay.
That's correct.
I wanted to make sure I wasn't hit on the head in a spinning house of a tornado. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that. But I think the success or the lack of success with a lot of Wizard of Oz media, because there's some amazing things, and I wanted to do it in the video, but I just didn't want to get into the weeds. So there's, of course, you have Wicked, you have tons of successful movies and shows and plays and everything. But for every great Wizard of Oz piece of media, there's, there is a lot of failed Wizard of Oz media. And I want to know I think there's a bigger problem with the Wizard of Oz. That's the movie. I think the movie has cast such a big shadow. It's so iconic to a fault, where you can't do anything about Wizard of Oz. Because I was thinking, well, this is a really good continuation. But it's only a good continuation because you have the same ingredients. Return to Oz, I really like it. I think, like you said, like people who are really faithful to the books like it, but it wasn't necessarily that experience that audiences wanted.
Right.
But with anything else, I was thinking, how would you make a successful sequel? Animation seems the way to go. Plays seem the way to go. Spin-offs. You had I know your personal favorite, the James Franco Wizard of Oz prequel. But the only way I think you could actually make a successful Wizard of Oz sequel is impossible because you'd have to remake the Wizard of Oz. And I don't think there's going to be anybody willing to undertake that just to do a sequel to it. Because
I wish it would get the Netflix treatment, like a la Anne with an E on Netflix, where they took Anne of Green Gables and gave it a few seasons and really worked through it. Mm-hmm. Then you would really have the space. The problem is, and you're right, it's iconic to a fault. People are scared to touch it. And so what companies tend to do is they tend to go dramatically in one direction or the other. So you either get a really hyper kid friendly version like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz on Boomerang, or you get a really dark, gritty, like Game of Thrones type show like Emerald City on NBC.
Yep.
And people tend, like, they're like, this is not your mom's Wizard of Oz. Well, but that's kind of what we want, though. Can we just have that? So I think people fall into the trap of either trying to redo exactly what was already done or do something completely different. And I'm getting the time notification. I don't know if you see it, but I'm getting the...
Yep, I got it too. So in case the stream dies out, folks. 10 minutes left. So we'll go ahead and finish these 10 minutes. I'm so sorry. Believe me, I just got a new computer. I'm going to buy Zoom for you so we don't run into this problem again. So thank you, Tori, for dealing with it. But let me ask you this then. So, and by the way, Emerald City. So let me ask you this question. How do you see a successful Wizard of Oz sequel? Do you see it being like the original, where it's sort of a now kind of kitschy, campy musical? Do you see it as, I'm speaking for film mostly, film or television, or does it have to be something grittier, something reimagined completely without the original characters?
We're either going to get remakes of the 1939 film or we're going to get reimaginings. I don't see anyone making a big budget direct sequel because they're just, the ruby shoes are just too big to fill. But I love that things like this exist because the cartoon is a great sequel. It is a great continuation. It works. Um, Unfortunately, when people look at a cartoon, I think the first thing they judge is the animation, and they judge the content by the form. And the animation fails, it lacks here. And you mentioned in your retrospective that shot from the Popland episode, which in my opinion, yeah, the most glaring mistake, but it's one of many. And if you judge a cartoon by its looks, Legends of Oz Dorothy's Return has the same problem. There's a lot of content there that's very good, but it's really bad animation. So unless you're willing to sit and adjust to what you're looking at, it will be missed. When I look at the artwork, they did put in a lot of effort here.
Oh
The
man, you have an actual animation. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It is a little frightening looking because I know it's supposed to be his muzzle around his mouth, so it looks like he just has a big frown. But that is beautiful.
Yeah, the artwork is beautiful. They obviously didn't just throw this together. They tried. They put in effort here. It was a Saturday morning cartoon. The budgetary constraints didn't allow them to have Disney-esque animation, but there's so much good to be found here. I love this cartoon, and I actually just got 2 more of these. Animated cells, guys, invest in these. They're ridiculously cheap, and they're artisan made and one of a kind. So if you're looking to collect stuff, collect this stuff.
And I think that, like you were saying, the animation, like, I love the character designs. Scarecrow is my personal favorite. I think he looks fantastic. Yeah, he looks fantastic. Everybody looks good at their best. It's just at their worst. I mean, it's comical. I mean, I don't know if the Popland reference you were making was the one where the lion is running away.
Yes.
I had to rewind it. That is the funniest thing I've seen since 2008, I think.
They were going for a complex shot. And they clearly they got the cells backwards, and it's a shame because it would have been a cool effect if they got it right. But there are shots in that episode that are really good. There's a shot of the Wicked Witch where the pop figure outside, Jack, gets up and gets Truckle, and then she says back. Mm-hmm. And it's almost anime-esque the way it flows. It's beautiful, gorgeously done. And there are a few shots in the show that are like that, mostly to do with the Wicked Witch. Whoever was animating her obviously was very talented. But I wish they had put in a little bit more effort there. However, I also really like Dorothy's design. And I know she was modeled after Ariel.
Yep. From The Little Mermaid, yep.
So I actually showed a college friend the DVD cover, and she said, and I quote, "Why is Dorothy so sexy?" And I was like, I never thought of her that way, but yeah, she's cute. They're all very likable. The eyes, look so dead sometimes, like especially the Tin Man.
Oh,
and his characterization, even, and his voice, it's not consistent all the way through.
No, and that's the thing. From episode to episode, you'll have where it looks really good. Like, it looks not only like a competent cartoon, but a greatly animated one. But then, like, the first episode, I remember when they're going to Munchkin Land and and the Munchkins are coming and they're dancing, and Dorothy just has her head rocking back and forth, just dead-eyed, and they're just staring into space. It's the cartoon with the most mistakes, and the only thing that holds it back is I love, like, the show's really funny, surprisingly funny. The lore, the stories. I mean, we didn't even get to talk about the Emerald Star, Keeping the Wizard Alive.
Oh, I love that song.
Great song, right? Phenomenal song. I'm surprised that hasn't been adapted into something.
We should record it. I know that whole song. We should record it one of these days. And also the voice cast. They had a primo voice cast. They had Tress MacNeille, Liz Georges, Charlie Adler. They had a really great... Oh, and they had Alan Oppenheimer as the wizard. He went on to do a lot of anime. The cast was great, and the vocal performances, I think, are what really take it over the top. Mm-hmm. They do amazing impressions of the principal characters. The only weak link, I think, there is the lady who played Glinda. I don't think her voice really got us there. But, I think all in all, if you're looking at this cartoon as a whole, it's a net positive for the Oz fandom. It's fun. And actually, a lot of the stuff they draw from, the different places they go, there is stuff in there from the Oz books. So, Time Town and all the walking clocks and the utensils walking around and the various lands of Oz are very much, reminiscent of the Baum series.
Yeah, and I was going to say we just have a little bit of time left, but really quick, what is the level of faithfulness to the actual books? So I know it's a direct sequel to the movie, but I did notice some things just from a little bit of research that they actually used, like you said, they were inserted from the books, which I was really surprised about how it's not made a big deal of, or you wouldn't even know it. You would just think these are just totally original characters.
Yeah, very minimally in some of the lands. I think you can definitely see the inspiration. But to me, the thing that really drives this home is the interpersonal relationships. I would strongly suggest to any of your viewers, go check out the ones that are posted online. The VHS and DVD releases actually omit a couple of episodes, and not by accident. 2 episodes that are never released anywhere are The Marvelous Milkmaid of Mechanica and The Day the Music Died, both of which involve romantic subplots. So the Tin Man having a girlfriend, and they highly imply the Dorothy Scarecrow ship in The Day the Music Died. So you don't see them released on home media. So definitely check out the ones that have been uploaded to YouTube.
Yeah, they're too hot for video, so you have to you have to get them online. Well, we got just 2 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and just read 1 or 2 more comments really quick. Lowell Lucas Jr. says, "I'm back. Did you answer the question?" Yep.
I did, yes.
And then
go back and watch.
Julius Johnson, "I think Tori would take the slippers in a slipper slip up episode."
Hi, Julius. I totally would.
And then let's go ahead and take a look if we got one more. All right, one more from Julius Johnson. "Which Ruby Slipper scene in the dictionary cartoon is your the Deke cartoon is your favorite, and your awesome Tori you star?"
Love you, Julius. Thank you so much. In terms of the Ruby Slippers, I think my favorite moment is when they are crashing in the cart in episode 2, and she asks for a soft landing, which was not specific enough. So the wheels change to flowers and they crash. They get hurt, and Dorothy feels so mad at herself. She's like beating herself up, like, "I'm sorry, guys, like that was my bad." And they comfort her and they said, "You'll figure it out." It allowed for a moment of weakness for Dorothy, which I think is important in our heroines. She's not perfect and she doesn't always get it right. And it also allowed for her friends to show their support. So that's my favorite Ruby Slipper moment in the show. Thank you, Julius.
I love it. Thank you, Julius, for coming on too. And we got about a minute and a half left, so I want to make sure we get you plugged properly. Instagram, TikTok. I'm telling you, you're one of 2 people I follow on Instagram, and it is your feed dominates literally everything. But it is so addicting to watch. I mean, if you want just information on information and just bite-sized 20-second, 30-second clips, it's so much fun. It's really great. Make sure you check her out on the Oz vlog on Instagram and on TikTok. I haven't seen, I'm sure you have a lot of Dorothy dances on there. But is there any upcoming project you have, or anything else that any appearances you're going to be making?
So currently working on some stuff I cannot disclose, some documentary work. And obviously there's a lot coming up with the Wicked films. So stay tuned for all of that goodness. Follow me at the Oz Vlog on TikTok, Instagram, not X, we don't do that, and Threads. And I'm here on YouTube also as the Oz Vlog.
All right, Tori, we cannot tell you how much we appreciate you. Everybody in the chat says thank you and goodbye. I'm sorry, folks. I'm going to go ahead and get Zoom after this, so maybe we can have Tori back and she'll discuss some more Oz and just anything else. But Tori, thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. I can't wait to come back.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.
Have a good day, everybody.